so what, then you didn't convey it. So I'll answer the so what question up front, kind of give you a roadmap of where I'm going. All right, so the notion is this, and I've heard it echoed many times in this room already, and I'm very happy about that, but that we are all connected through the divine, and that we are all extensions of the divine, and that there is one, and then there are many, many, many different perspectives that we represent. So each of us has our, our own perspective, so to speak, but we are all extensions. All right, so this is thing number one. Now, it's difficult, more so, your physical body is easy to be seen reflected. We've talked about mirrors before. It's easy to see your physical body reflected. It's more difficult to see your spiritual body reflected. However, you can and do if you would like to make it better. So, with that, let me go ahead and get the so what questions out of the way. So why would one want to develop in the spirit? Well, thing number one, it is the process of us developing into our full humanity. We're not there right now, but that's the good thing. We get an opportunity to keep working at it from a global perspective. But the things that many of us in this room have already experienced as we progress can become much more normalized. And here's what I mean. Right now, most folks will say, oh, I was just thinking about somebody, and all of a sudden their cell phone rings, right? And then it's that person. And then they'll just play it off like, oh, that was an accident or some freak coincidence. Not paying attention to how often that alleged freak occurrence happens. Or if you're thinking about a certain kind of thing, and then you go out into the world and then you see that thing. Or what's going to happen to you all today. We're going to have this conversation, you're going to leave this room, and then you're going to see it going and coming. That's how it's going to work. Now, these are not accidents. Going back to what we said before, it may be the case that we are perspective in our individual body, but we are extended in the spirit, connected to all. So it's kind of a, the physical is an illusion, so to speak. So with that being said, even though we are individuated and embodied in this room, we are connected in spirit in this room. And so our individual agendas work and play with each other and help and support, and when you're developed, even more so. And so at this point, many of us can accidentally see what's going to happen into the future, or feel what a loved one or even someone else is thinking in another state, or think, I need to go to this particular place at this particular time because there'll be someone there for me, and then you show up there and it goes down as such. As we continue to develop, these things can happen more and at a greater rate. So that's my first point with the so what question. My second point with the so what question is that we are in a very interesting spot in human development. We are at a place where, see, I also teach humanities. And unfortunately, our history likes to track progress by way of technological advancement. And so what will happen is if you see a history book, they'll show pictures of an old horse and buggy, then a car, then a more fancy car, as if that's how we're progressing. But that's only one way that humans progress. And technological is one, but then we have spiritual, governmental, social, our bodies. There are many ways on which we progress. Unfortunately, because in popular Western idea, it is technology, that's what's shot ahead. And we are lagging behind globally as far as our social and spiritual go. Now, what's very unfortunate about that is we are now at the point where our technology has gotten to where we can destroy ourselves. We can wipe ourselves completely off the face of the earth and do not have the sense not to do it. So, that's the so what. There's work that has to get done. By us to ensure that we can continue this project going on. All right, so why here, why now, why this room? In this room, there are many folks who are practitioners of what we call indigenous religions. Well, the good thing about that is it's not affected in the way I was just speaking, the way that technology fools you into thinking what's important is you can build something external to yourself. Something about indigenous helps you to understand that part of understanding the spirit is going into and going in. And this is how this can happen. All right, well, with that in mind, and this is the very room that I would need to speak to and implore and admonish, if you would, to keep doing what you're doing, but do it more, because there's a great deal of spiritual healing and development that can happen. Now, I'm not, strictly speaking, inside of an African tradition. However, I got the opportunity with my colleague, what ended up happening was she went through her, this was about 3 years ago, she went through her year initiation to the Rishoshun, and I was around and involved in a lot of the actions that were happening when this was going on. And so I gained a great deal of insight into, the possibilities that can happen when everybody's on one accord, thinking in one way about one thing. So I want to arrive at that after I tell you a quick story of where I've come through my own personal tradition. All right, so I did start. I've heard a lot of people throwing the Christian tradition around and using it as our rubber mat and all that. So it's not that bad. I mean, I'm not upset about it. I'm going to talk about how my departure happened, to be honest. Now, how it goes down is this. I was raised in the church. I grew up in the church. I had no real cause to fight against the contradictions that I obviously saw. I had no reason to fight certain battles. I just kind of went along as it went along. But then, in 2005, something very particular happened. My brother, who I was very close to, was killed in an auto accident. And that turned me upside down, outside and inside. And so what ended up happening is I stopped. I could no longer continue with the contradiction, namely this. On Saturday, somebody was standing in front of, of the body, saying that, hey, this isn't a bad thing. It's a homegoing celebration. We should all be happy and excited. And then the same person in the same room the next day on Sunday says, oh, I'm happy that I'm alive and the blood is running warm in my veins and I could have been sleeping in my grave but I'm not. So I was like, wait, well, which is it then? Is it happy? Is it homegoing for real? Or are you happy not to be sleeping in your grave? Which is it? Okay, so this caused a departure, if you would. And the place I went through my crime actually is what led me there. It was my tears that led me there because I thought to myself, well, the one who we are supposed to be attending to is, well, I will call him Yeshua, you know him as Jesus. As it goes down, there's one very short verse in the Bible that caught my attention. In fact, it's the shortest verse in the Bible, which is what? See, I thought I was in a room where people had a history of knowing that. Okay, so that was what got my attention. So I went there to try to figure out what happened. Now, I'll zoom because we don't have much time, so I'll zoom quickly through how that went. But what ended up going down, long and short of it is, there was a friend of Jesus who had a brother who was sick and was about to die. And so they sent a message to Jesus, will you come heal him? All right, so he's like, all right, I'll be there. And so before he could get there, the brother dies. We know this is Lazarus. Brother dies, and as Yeshua's walking up, Miriam runs out, and she's bawling, crying, screaming, I imagine, and yelling, if you had come earlier, you're late. If you had come earlier, then my brother would have died. Right.
But he was a black man.
So what ends up going on, though, what we end up seeing, this is referred to as a miracle. But the miracle was not in Lazarus being raised from the dead, because Yeshua was known that he could do that before he got there, right? For him, that's not a miracle. That's an understanding of things in the spirit when you evolve at that level. So it wasn't a miracle for him, but when he showed up, he's crying. Now, he didn't say, without crying, silly girl, that was, you know what I can do, he didn't do that, right? So there was a connection, a love connection that happened, and this is what got my attention. That's what actually, broke down to ground zero. So I could find something certain and then build myself back out. So then the first relationship that I was quite interested in was Miriam and Yeshua, Jesus and Mary Magdalene. All right, so I wanted to start there. Now, of course, you can't find that in the canonical Gospels, so you have to go elsewhere, other places to start your studies, and then go in. And that's what Mary taught me, was how to go in. And because the way I see it, the majority of the New Testament is attributed to Paul. Paul never met Jesus in the flesh, he met him in the spirit. So I think if he can do it, I can do it. And so so that's why the title is mystic in there. I've since this time been involved in many very astounding things, which again, I could recount them, but I would not want someone to get caught up in the thing that's called the miracle, because it's the relationship, it's the love connection that ends up being that's what's at stake here, that's what's happening. Okay, so what I want to do is give you 2 quick analogies, all right, and then relate that back into the year initiation where I learned how it was that the Spirit was being mirrored first to our director, and then after her departure, she went to Africa for a little while, and then I stepped up as the leader of this particular group, and then it changed in character as my character is different than hers. And then when she got back, we were able to talk and put notes together, so to speak, and understand what was happening in that room and how to adjust that for better healing, for a better sense of community, for better growth. And so here we go with this part. First analogy. Let's go back to the physical mirror. It's easy to talk about physical things. So when you see a mirror, you're only seeing kind of one perspective. You ever seen someone, or maybe even been that person, who obviously didn't have a view from the back of whenever they were getting dressed, obviously, or doing their hair, whatever it was they were doing? Usually you'll see rollers in the back of somebody's hair, and then you'll know that they only saw themselves from the front, or something like this. All right, so if you are trying to get a better image of yourself, let's say that you're trying on a dress or a suit or something of the sort, then you would go into a place that has multiple mirrors, right? All strategically placed, not arbitrarily placed. right? But strategically placed in such a way that when you walk in, you can turn, move, and then see all parts of yourself kind of at one time. Does that make sense? Okay, so already you're seeing the metaphor that, one mirror is good, many mirrors is even better. And if they're strategically placed, meaning, very well orchestrated, then you can see even more with more precision, right? All right, so now let me take you to another one that we're going to put these two metaphors together. Because again, it's hard to reach the spirit. All we can do, especially in words, we can point. And point with our words, but that's about it. Through our traditions and our initiations and our others, we can practice and then learn that way. It's much more difficult to do in the letter. But at any rate, the wind. Has anybody ever been walking and seen the wind pick up leaves and make a little circle? You seen that? Great. All right. So I'm going to use this analogy, but also, how many of you are aware of the natural force called a hurricane? You aware of that? If a hurricane was to pass through here right now, it started many, many hundreds of miles away, right? But it's not the wind from hundreds of miles away that is carried to us. The wind that is here now is what moves. It's the energy that starts there and then changes as it goes across, and then we experience something through the wind. Following that much? Okay, so then, if you are watching the wind pick up leaves and do this little, circle thing, then think about it. If it were not for the leaves, then you would be unable to see the phenomenon. Right? So the phenomenon is something else. It's not the leaves. The leaves end up being, and let me just rush it along now, when we're talking about our person, our individual identities, we pick up these things. We pick up these leaves, if you would. Different colors, different shades, different sizes, different shapes. But that's not who or what we are, essentially. Yes. Just like in the sense that when you see that circle thing, the phenomenon is only being traced by the leaves. Right? So when you're getting to know someone or come into contact with someone, it's not that you can just see them in a snapshot and understand them or know them. You have to watch their wind, if you would, as it goes for a while. You have to watch them be happy, watch them be sad, watch them get mad, see what they do. This kind of thing, right? All right, so rushing us all along. Thank you, sir. I've told you before that the importance in developing in the spirit is developing your love and your love connection. Now, the thing that's the antithesis of that, or will slow you down from that, is fear. Fear and all of its derivatives. So you've got fear, anxiety, anger, self-deprecation, which, all right, all these things end up happening. So getting these things out and uplifting our love energy ends up being what allows us to connect to much higher possibilities. Okay, so what ends up happening is this. During the year, just to run you quickly through it, during the, again, there were many aspects, like I said, I'm not a part of the tradition, so I know there are many parts of it I have no knowledge of. So what I'll tell you is what I saw. All right, so what I saw is my colleague I was starting my locks, actually, she was shaving hers. And then she had to wear, she was wearing all white for a year. Her mirrors were covered up. Her mirrors were covered up. She was not allowed to perceive herself in a mirror. And no one who was not in her tradition could touch her. All right, so what that did, and she's the director, as we said before, of an African drum and dance ensemble, which I'm the co-director. And so in this community, I got to see this played out. Now, what first started to happen is we were protecting her very much. Every time we would go out, people would want to just walk straight and grab her or do something, and then we'd have to, like, wait, whoa, slow down, or when she went to hand something, when she went to hand something to somebody, their hand kept being at the same time, she had to put it down, now you get it. So there are many things that we ended up having to, do and watch. But then, because she said to me that part of the initiation was to be able to see herself reflected through others. And so that stuck with me. And so for that year, I watched that. I watched the behaviors. I watched her different, I don't want to say attitudes, it makes like it's bad, but attitudes are good at that, right? So I watched her perspectives of dispositions, we like that. It wasn't that they were beginning to manifest, it was just that I had begun to see them as manifesting from her. And so then I started watching the things, knowing her, the things that she both struggles with and triumphs in, and I started seeing that that was the same thing the group was struggling with and triumphing in. So I was like, whoa, this is pretty serious. Now, what that allowed for her to do was see herself. And if you can see yourself, then you can begin to make those adjustments, or begin to make those, cleanups, so to speak, so that you can raise it to higher levels. Well, then what ended up happening is that she, went to Africa so that she could study more, and then I was in charge of the group, and the whole thing shifted. They behaved differently, not necessarily better. I mean, not differently is what we started to notice. So when she came back, again, I don't have much time, so I'm going to zoom it on. When she came back, we sat down and talked about, first, her journey to the motherland, but also we talked about that year in white. And what we learned and what we ended up seeing reflected in our group, the people who are around us, the mirrors who are around us, strategically placed, if you would, so that, so that we could all be better. So what I'm saying, like I said in the beginning, my charge to you, keep doing what you're doing. Make sure you understand this is very, very important stuff. It's already been said before that, you know, Africa produced the first folks. So what that means is that the West are our unruly children. And so it's time for us to come